Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
February is upon us. January is done. Longest month of the year when you're waiting for your pay to come in. And some familiar guests today, Simon, who, I don't know, it's not often we say this about guests, that we were rather hoping not to have on again, as we were hoping that Aquind had finally been stopped.
Indeed, yes. So we've got Let's Stop Aquind back on for the third time. So welcome back. Welcome back, ladies. So we've got Viola Langley and Janet Sampson joining us. Janet seems to be having some problems with her connection, so she's in and out. Hopefully we can get her in to stay long enough that we can carry on with the show with her. So so look, technical problems to start with there. So apologies that we were slightly late. Welcome.
Technically, Simon, Janet doesn't appear to be the only person at the moment having technical problems, as your audio possibly is going through a different style cable that's burrowing under Portsmouth. So at the moment we are struggling to hear you just a little bit. So just while you're fiddling with knobs and sliders as you do, welcome back, Viola.
Yeah, hi Ian, lovely to see you.
Well, absolute pleasure to have you back on, although as I said, we had hoped that that this, I think when we last met, we discussed at the end of the podcast, you know, what would you be doing with your life after Aquind had finally been stopped? And I think then you were a little bit cautious that the entire race might not have been run, and it seems like there's still more to do.
Yeah, agree entirely, Ian. As we can see, we will have to do more, and that's what it is about tonight, isn't it?
Absolutely, and so I was just looking back. So how many years now have you been? I think it would be fair to say you were a bit of an unlikely activist and sort of fell into this. But how many years now have you been working with Let's Stop Aquind?
Since October 2019, I would say. So that's nearly 2.5 years, isn't it?
It is indeed. It is indeed. So yes, and still work to do. Let's just check in with Simon and see whether his beautiful dulcet tones are back online.
Okay, is that any better?
That is much a little bit quiet, but I'm sure if you harness your inner Brian Blessed and project, I'm sure we can make it work.
I shall try my best. I'm not going to do a Gordon's Alive rendition because that's just going to blow the microphone out. Yes, hello. Right. Thanks for vamping through that. Ian, shall we have a look at so welcome, Janet. So last time, Viola, I think you were joined by Paula, and I think the time before that you had Paula, Ellie, and non-Aquind joined us as well, didn't we? I think for the first time that you were on. So welcome, Janet.
Thank you very much. I've been co-opted at short notice, and I'm another member of the Let's Stop Aquind Comms group.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for jumping into the breach at short notice.
So, yes, Janet, for those of our listeners who haven't met you before, so what got you interested in LSA, and how long have you been part of the team?
I think it was quite. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we've got you back again. We keep losing you, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah,
no, that's all right.
I joined in quite near to the date that Viola mentioned. I got wind of the fact that there was going to be a static protest along the shoreline. I was on holiday at the time, and I was trying my best to get back for that. Didn't quite make it that far on the road, but I saw it in the press, and another friend of mine was started telling me about it. So I was invited by Viola to group. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Well, should we try and press on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So so our first question, I guess, is let's bring our audience up to speed. Can you talk us through the timeline through basically what's happened? So, you know, last year we thought it was all over and it wasn't. So what's been happening? What's been happening since January? We keep
Yes. Sorry, the
losing
connection's
Janet.
not very good.
Is that try turning your camera off and we could just have you audio only? Your system will be struggling less. Then it might
Okay.
then at least keep you on. Let's try that. Sorry, I know that's not as nice. It's not as
No,
nice for the
that's fine.
audio.
That's fine.
Keep you in. Keep you.
Yes, I can answer the question for you.
Thank you.
Just over a year ago, we just finished an interview with a journalist from one of the newspapers. We were just down by the shoreline, and suddenly from Viola, and amazingly, to say that Quasi Quartet rejected the application by Aquind, and you know what to expect, and the news came a day earlier than we were expecting. And obviously there was much joy in the city, and everyone thought while we didn't rest on, we knew that Aquind could make an appeal.
Shall I take on from there until Janet is coming back, so we bridge it over?
Yes, please. Oh, hang on.
So, you know, after January, Aquind. Janet, are you back?
Yes.
Okay.
So we were waiting to see what would happen, and Aquind put in an appeal at the last moment that they could. We approved. We then had a long wait during last year to find out what the review would be. The review was in November the 22nd. It was at the Royal Courts of Justice in London. There was a barrister and team for Aquind, barrister and team for the government, barrister for Portsmouth City Council as an interested party. At the conclusion of the 2 days, the judge said that there would possibly Christmas, but couldn't guarantee it. So we've been on tenterhooks for some while, and then January, the rather crushing news came that the been upheld for.
So obviously that was widely reported and came as, I think, a blow to many people in Portsmouth. So if I just turn to Viola, so what does the High Court ruling mean? Is that now Aquind's green light to start digging trenches through Portsmouth?
No, absolutely not. There are various options. Number one, of course, the decision will go back to the Secretary of State, but not to the Secretary of State at the time, but to our new Secretary of State for the BEIS. So he will have to make a decision, which does not mean necessarily that he will approve that the decision was won by Aquind, by the High Court. It could be just a better argued refusal. So any way is possible. Now, as you know, we did have I don't know whether you know, we had a meeting last week with both MPs, Jared Vernon Jackson, our leader, the news and planning officers. And the process, what is going to happen is basically from now onwards, up to about 4 months, we are expecting something called a statement of matters, which will be a document published by the Secretary of State, looking at what he has found and possibly asking interested parties to look at the reasons again, which would mean for us, not just for LSA, but also for all interested parties, residents who have written to Aquind about their concerns, people from allotments, people who live along the road, whether that is Moorings Way or right up to Lovedean. Everybody can get involved again after we have seen this statement of matters, and we can question again whether this route chosen by Aquind is the right route for an Aquind interconnector.
And I think reading the judgment, and again, it was a little bit, you need, as you've explained in previous podcasts, you need to brush up on your legal skills pretty quickly on this one. But the ruling, as I understood it, was that when the Secretary of State made their ruling previously, that the High Court felt that they couldn't evidence that they had, when they came to that decision, that they had looked at Aquind's evidence about alternative routes properly. Is that, and I'm putting properly in air quotes there, is that in essence what the High Court had to say?
It is quite interesting because I actually read today again the decision of the Secretary of State from the 20th of January 2021 again, just to have a 22 to have a look again, and it is quite interesting because I think very obviously it was recognized by the Secretary of State that the adverse effects for Portsmouth and beyond are huge, and there are actually really something which has to be considered, and therefore he concluded that the alternatives, it actually says alternatives, in particular Mannington, has not been considered enough and fully. And I think that is really important that we actually stress here the environmental, the impacts on Portsmouth and beyond are to be considered. And I think that is really important when we actually get to the next stage where we write our new objections, that we bring all those reasons very clearly forward towards the new Secretary of State for the BIS yet again, and possibly even stronger. And
so in terms of that ruling, do you say it's almost kind of, you talked about a sort of 4-month timeline. Is that the sort of time frame we're looking at, or is it almost like a game of snakes and ladders now, where we go back down to almost the start of the board, and we could be into a multiple year process?
Now, the 4 months is only the statement, up to 4 months. It could be written tomorrow. It could be published tomorrow. We don't know. Nobody knows. PCC doesn't know. We have no idea. And from that onwards, there is again a certain time period. It could be up to a year. It could be 2 years. So nobody really knows exactly until we see the statement of matters and what will be required for the new Secretary of State to make a decision.
Thank you. That's really clear, Viola, and help you. Thank you for leading us through quite a tricky piece of legal fine pointery.
Yeah, I think one comment I would like to make actually is we do know that the examination authorities have actually recommended the development consent order. They actually said, yes, we think this is acceptable. Through mitigation we can achieve, to deal with all the problems we've got. And I think that is something we have to look at it again, because obviously the Secretary of State didn't agree, and the Secretary of State actually is how can I put it, is actually now I can't get the word. It's for our government. It is saying, the government is clearly saying, we don't want this project, and he was the representative for the government. So that's a very, very interesting fact, yeah. And my hope is that the new Secretary of State will feel similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was some quite I think part of the reason that Kwasi Kwarteng listed in his rejection was about not having Manningfield, because at the time that Aquind asked National Grid for their feasibility study of a connection of this nature, at the time there was a live application and a live connection agreement for I think it was 970 megawatt wind farm off Portsmouth that was planned to feed into Manningfield, and although that actually the planning application for that wind farm was refused, the actual connection agreement to secure that capacity on the network for that wind farm was still in place. So at the time that Aquind asked for their feasibility study, the bit that they wanted to use would have discounted that, but there were other reasons about Manningfield, weren't there? I think further in the report it talks about it talks about there being planning issues around Manningfield being surrounded on three sides by housing and stuff like that. But again, it just kind of points that it's interesting that the High Court ruling doesn't say it has to go ahead. It just says actually the Secretary of State's reasoning isn't necessarily that sound. Is that kind of really what you're feeling? It's not really a green light to start the diggers up in Portsmouth. It's really a go again and just and justify it again.
Simon, just one thing. It is called Mannington, not Manningfield. Yeah, it's Mannington.
Sorry, Mannington.
Yeah.
That's my brain. Yeah.
Yeah, it is right. It was a little bit of a timeline the Secretary of State actually questioned. But I think what we must understand, that this High Court ruling wasn't about the decision itself. It was about the process, how the Secretary of State got to his decision. So they haven't actually questioned the decision. They have actually questioned the Secretary of State. How did he deal with that? What has he done right? What has he done wrong? And according to what we know from the judgment paper, it's quite difficult to read, actually, that out of the 7 points, the judge actually agreed that 4 points, it's a bit like a tennis game, 4 points to Aquind, 3 points to the interested parties and PCC. So out of those 7 points, 4 points Aquind actually challenged and said, the Secretary of State in actual fact wasn't correct in his procedure, how he got to the decision, and that is what has been challenged.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. Sorry for my misremembering that it's Mannington, not Manningfield. I don't quite know where that. If there's anywhere with if there's any town called Manningfield that is suddenly worried it's in an interconnector cable, I apologise for the distress. It's entirely unintentional. Hopefully, Janet, we can move on to our next question to yourself. So hopefully I'm going to show the comments from the local politicians, and then it'd just be interesting it'd be good to hear what your response is to what they'd actually had to say about the decision. So Portsmouth South MP Stephen Morgan, on his website, he goes on to say Aquind's desperate attempt to rerun the argument through the High Court doesn't change the facts, and it shouldn't change the outcome. It's been clear from the outset that this project would bring untold disruption to our daily lives and natural environment with no clear benefits. Meanwhile, the company directors' cosy relationships with government ministers continue to raise suspicions. My record of action working with community campaigners against Aquind speaks for itself. I will continue to do everything in my power to ensure this project is stopped once and for all. And Portsmouth North MP Penny Morden said, so again, a statement from her website, I remain confident that the Secretary of State's original decision should still stand. It is not the case that the court has told the Secretary of State what the decision. I, along with many others, will be making the case against why this project should be refused, as well as help demonstrate the strength of feeling the people of Portsmouth have towards this project. It is not just bad for Portsmouth and the local area, but also for the whole of the UK. It does not help our energy resilience. In fact, it weakens it. There are many other concerns over the project, which includes a telecommunications cable. I remain confident that this unwanted and unnecessary project will never happen. And Gerald Vernon Jackson, the leader of Portsmouth City Council, was quoted in the Portsmouth Evening News as saying, it is difficult for the minister to come to a different conclusion given the appalling attack Aquind made on a fellow cabinet minister. The attack on Penny Morden was very vicious. I forget which of the people involved with the project said of Penny Morden that she was uncontrollable or something like that to that effect. Yeah.
Mr. Alexander to Merkel.
Yes. Aquind may feel that the amount of money they have donated to the Conservative Party means they are entitled to planning permission. So it's one of those rare things that local politicians, parties, our 2 MPs and councillors across the political spectrum agree is a daft idea and shouldn't happen. That doesn't happen that often. Janet, have we still got you? I know you keep trying with the connection, but you seem to. She's coming and go. We've not got her at the moment. Have we got her back now? Are you there, Janet? It's weird. I can see you kind of trying to enter, but I can't actually. I haven't got anything for me to click to actually put you back into the stream. So while we try to figure that out, sorry, Viola, do you have any response to about that? How important is that cross-party support to a campaign like this?
I think it is extremely important, and we know that we always said, united, we can stop this project. If we show our MPs, our Portsmouth City Council, our residents are against this project, and we explain reasonably and logically the reasons for that, I think we need everybody working in unity together. And I think it's one of the things lots of parties said to me, it is amazing what we can actually do and achieve when we work together, only united, all of us, and we can do it.
Fantastic. Well said. Janet, I don't know how much of that you caught, whether there was anything you wanted to add to how important it is that the parties are working together. And then we've just lost her again. Oh.
Hello? Hello?
And you're back, Janet.
Sorry.
Hello. Oh, I sound like a Dalek.
No, Janet, you're coming through loud and clear there, Janet. So just I think there seems to be an interaction between your sound and Simon's, which is causing us a little bit of technical issue. But the question, I guess, that, and hopefully you picked up on it, was how important is that cross-party support to you?
Yes, I saw the statements and I heard what Viola just said, and I think, unusual, isn't it, for everybody to be singing from the same songbook, everybody unified in their views about unnecessary and likely that it's ever going to happen. We can only hope that there's so many delays and hitches and questions and complications. We just hope on this. But as Viola said, with the justices very much on due process, whether
shall I just add perhaps something?
I was just going to pass to you, Viola, and ask. So again, based on what you've heard so far, and how confident are you that that ultimately the people of Portsmouth and all of that political allegiance will mean that the connector doesn't go ahead?
How hopeful are we? I mean, what I have to say is, when we look back at the last 2.5 years, if we hadn't acted together as a unity, Aquind would by now actually digging those trenches and horizontally drilling under the allotment. So we've already delayed their process, certainly for a year or 2 years. I think I am very hopeful because we have the support of our MPs. We have the support from Portsmouth City Council. We do know what we are up against. We are very, very much aware of this. But we also know that the French side, the non-Aquind, and their MPs of the local regional area are against this project. And I think one or two of the things we haven't mentioned, only in the quotes from Stephen Morgan and Penny Mordaunt, is that we mustn't forget what has been highlighted over the last 2 years, the political background to this whole company and to the donations. As you know, Led by Donkeys made a fantastic video with us showing 34 MPs actually receiving donations, and it is legal, we do know, but you do ask yourself the question, why is this happening? Why would you do this? And we also know from Panorama, which showed a program about the background of the possibility, the money which is actually coming to finance this project, and we shouldn't just swipe it away. We know in the examination process only planning issues are important, and we've always raised the question, should it be only planning issues? Should we look at the morality and the ethics as well? And of course this question has been swept aside, but I think we should not forget that either.
And I think with that, there's two elements to that. One is that I think now a lot of those donations are in the public domain, aren't they? There is an element of, I think if Aquind hoped that was going to be, you know, done quietly and done kind of in dark and back rooms and no one would know, that's very much not the case now. And I do wonder whether there's a balance, you know. Again, when I read those statements about, you know, Penny Mordaunt for me seems to be 100% behind this campaign and is actively campaigning from within government. So I do wonder whether there is wisdom in, you know, perhaps suggesting or dwelling on that relationship between the Aquind money and the Conservative Party.
Yeah, and I think another issue which I don't know whether you remember it, when we took part in the examination process now nearly 2 years ago, there was also something mentioned like fiber optic cable, a big telecommunication cable. Now, when originally Aquind asked for this project to become, and I say it slowly, it took me a long time to learn it, a nationally significant infrastructure project, it was only ever supposed to be an interconnect, an energy infrastructure project. Now, during the examination process, it became a real controversial issue whether Aquind should be allowed to actually also at the same time build up a telecommunication system faster than anything else which we've seen so far, and should it be really part of this whole development? And I think Penny in particular and Stephen Morgan have highlighted this issue and said it could be a possibility for our national security, because we are the base of the Navy, aren't we? Portsmouth is a very, very important place.
No, it's and again, I think Penny referenced it in a statement there. You know, this still, and it's interesting, isn't it, that it still doesn't look like anything like a good idea. So, Simon, to you.
Yeah, sorry, I've lost my way a little bit with the trying to mop up the technical things in the background. Where are we up to?
Do you want to pick up? I can. And I think you touched on it there, Viola. Obviously, we had our French chums on for one of the podcasts. I think it's, forgive my French accent, I've got a CSE grade 5. The non-Aquind, our friends in France who are fighting against the pipeline. How are they getting on?
Oh, you know, we've been, you probably have seen last week the big article in Portsmouth News. We have organized some contacts with Portsmouth News and the non-Aquind president and former president, who speaks beautiful English, and he was on the show I think last time, and we reaffirmed our unity, and they said nothing has changed on the French side. The French residents and of those areas concerned are certainly against it. The MPs, the local MPs, are against it. The prefet of that area against it, and even in the press, it was said by the, what they call it, the energy transition minister. It was in a public TV program that France has got 4 interconnectors and it doesn't need a 5th interconnector, and it was referring very clearly to Aquind. And so you will really have to ask yourself, why Aquind is still going ahead. And I just really, Ian and Simon, I don't understand it. I try, I look from every single angle and I can't understand it. If France rigorously says no, what is the point in going ahead with this development consent order here in Britain?
It is it's indeed a key point. I think the whole and they actually mention that in the documents, don't they, about the sequential nature of all of these elements of the plan needing to be yeses, essentially, to get permission in order for the whole thing to work. There's no point in them getting consent in Le Havre if they can't get consent on this side of channel, or vice versa. There's no point. But I guess they're fighting to try and get consent and drive it that way. But hopefully our friends over the channel will have a better will have a good show of actually trying to resist that there. But it seems that everything hinges from the decision to choose Le Havre as the departure point.
Yes, Simon, you see,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you here, when this is right that you say Le Havre, but it is wrong that you say Le Havre. Now let me explain that.
Okay.
Because in the judgment,
Mhm.
point 9, fact 9, it says clearly, the actual judge says that the landfall in France is Le Havre. In the examination report, it says Le Havre, and it is not Le Havre. They've shifted some time ago. I don't know exactly when it happened, but certainly before or during the examination process, it was shifted nearer to Dieppe, which is about 40 kilometers further east. And that has huge consequences when you actually look at the range of interconnectors being available to be landfalls in Britain. It changes everything. And we've been highlighting this through the examination process, and we will highlight this when the next step comes forward. It is wrong, because if you talk to Jean-Nicolas and to Donald Brumont, they live in Barnabo. Now, Barnabo is about 19 miles inland from Dieppe or Pourville, where they intend to go in. This is a wrong fact. And it's not your mistake, Simon, because it is actually in the papers.
Oh, well, that's it's comforting to know that it isn't a mistake that I made, but it's
No.
a bit disturbing that it's a mistake actually in the documentation. Okay, so I guess kind of moving on to kind of like a different gear from that. So there are several, like you say, there's several elements and things have changed from when the original application is made. So there's reason to kind of revisit that in the circumstances that exist now rather than the ones that existed on the original application. But other things have changed really as well, haven't they? So, for example, the situation in Europe isn't the same. They might not be so they might not be so happy to flog us all of their spare electricity. So has with the war in Ukraine and the political changes in the situation in Europe, what does that change in regards to the project itself, do you think?
Janet?
Well,
have we got you enough to answer that one, Janet? Thank you.
It has been stated in the media recently that as you say, with this change, that France having spare energy, the likelihood of that is diminished. So, that makes it even less logical to be having interconnected. They've also said that, they have 4 interconnectors. If a 5th might be to the detriment of what already exists, which would be a nonsense.
And if you actually look at articles, I just typed in and I've watched it over the last half year in particular, you probably all have heard or read about the nuclear reactors being quite corroded or having some maintenance problems. And France has got 56, from what I read in the press, reactors, of which at a certain time, October, November, December, half had to be shut down, if we can believe the articles I read online. So they have problems actually with their reactors. So that actually, from what I also understood in a couple of articles, that France actually was the first time in need of electricity to be imported to them. So there are real problems on the European side, and of course the Ukrainian war does not help either. So again, the question is, why do we want this interconnector?
Well, I should imagine Aquind's motivation is quite clear, but whether it's needed is this. I guess that's the $64 million question: is it still needed? Is it still viable?
Perhaps we have to ask the question as well. It is bi-directional, and we always want to share, and it's interconnectors per se are not a bad idea. We are just saying this one, the route and the background of a company are not a good idea. Don't forget bi-directional. So France will need energy too.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. That's a very good point. I guess all that wind power from Scotland's got to go somewhere, but whether it can get all the way down here to get to France is another matter of time. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that one, Janet? Or
No, I think that's a really important point that Viola's made there, though. That having it okayed from this side, but the on the French side, and stand united with us. It's not going to just suddenly happen, is it?
No.
And isn't there also a question really of our own resilience? Aren't we encouraged to produce our own energy in a sense, to make it possible with wind and solar energy to provide more energy and for us without less of an environmental impact? And we do know that the construction certainly of this whole project will have huge impacts on the local environment.
And I think that's actually an interesting angle, isn't it? Because what this project as a whole, and I know it's been very stressful for the people of Portsmouth and for what the impact might be on us. But do you think it's raised and elevated those wider questions as to whether the right thing is to just slurp in some more power from overseas, or whether it has elevated questions in people's minds about whether we should be investing more, in renewables? After all, we're an island with water all around us, and water and wind almost come hand in hand. So, do you think in some ways it has started to ask questions about our wider energy strategy?
Janet?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, all the way forward that keeps being discussed for the environment, so it seems at odds.
And then we just lost Janet.
Yeah. I mean, we are encouraged, aren't we? Our government is actually asking us to be more resilient, to be more independent, to rely on our own energy resources, etc. So I think that's certainly something to look at. And I think the other thing we haven't mentioned at all, and I can't give you an up-to-date now piece of information, but there are quite a few interconnectors already existing, not just with France, Belgium, etc. There are quite a few. And if we look at the number required, I think the government said 18 gigawatt. They wanted by a certain time, I can't remember because I haven't actually checked it now again. But we certainly are pretty close to that, 15, 16 or so already. So you do have to ask yourself that question in that respect as well.
So I guess the next question, Viola, is what does LSA have planned to keep this in the public consciousness? We've covered it here, and we again we will keep plugging away. But what plans have you got really just to keep the people of Portsmouth on guard? Because this has been this has been quite a long campaign, and from what we touched on today, it might be a couple of years more. So, what's in your locker to keep it fresh and to keep everyone on point?
Yeah, I think first of all, Ian, I'd like to say that it isn't just Portsmouth, because I know when we started at first, there were people crying out from Denmead, Waterlooville, and saying, don't forget us. What about us here in Lovedean? So I'm not speaking just for, obviously I live in Portsmouth, but I speak for all those people who will be affected, or would be affected, not will be, would be affected by the interconnector. And what we have planned, I put a little sort of like point plan together, which if I tell you what we thought, and probably there will be more points added. First of all, we want to work together with all parties, council, both MPs and all residents as much as we can. There are still people who really do not know about Aquind. I still get occasionally, what's Aquind? Who's Aquind? And people do not know. So our main task is raise awareness, spread the message, so people really do know what it would mean if it happened. Now, once the statement of Meta is out, we certainly want to write as LSA group again objections, rejections, and like I said earlier, just the fact that Le Havre is still mentioned. So there are actual facts, not just quite right. And we've got a few ideas which we want to discuss and have discussed already, and want to take forward to the Secretary of State to make sure he looks at that very, very clearly. We want to encourage the public, the interested parties, and there are a huge number of interested parties, huge number of just individuals as well, all those allotment members who will be affected, all the people living along the road where this so-called, where the interconnector would go along, they can all again write their objections. And we will inform them. That will be through the Facebook groups, through the website, but also personally sending them messages, say, look, you've got an opportunity here, please take this opportunity. We also want to, if we can afford it, because we have no money, remember we are grassroots movement, we have no money, no finances, we would like to have an updated leaflet of what we talked about today. We had a leaflet giving all the information, but not of the last year, because we thought we might not need it any longer. We've talked about certain art projects again, like to raise awareness in town. For instance, I made last week a sort of like a flag about this big and wrote Stop Aquind on it, and we want to encourage people to do similar things like we've done before. We've got a few of those ideas because you get more residents on board, and when it's visual, people will ask more questions. We also talked with Nonna Aquind. We had it planned about a year ago, 2 years ago, but then COVID happened, to have actually a rally together. The Portsmouth residents and Nonna Aquind coming, and we are organizing a rally. We haven't got a date for it yet because it takes preparation, and we know quite a few of us, some of us, and not a few of us, are involved in the current sort of like election campaign. So we don't want to make it too difficult for people, but we have got that in mind. And if it takes a year or two, we've got plenty of opportunity. There's also an idea of having an open letter and taking it to Grant Shapps, the new Secretary of State for BEIS. Update our website, our Facebook group, and inform the public about every single bit we have. We are transparent, open, and we will not stop.
And that is marvelous to hear, Viola. Is that energy and passion has come through every time we've spoken to you, and it is I think it's a testament to the grassroots movement, that there is a multi-billion-pound business that feels that it can ride roughshod over, the people of Portsmouth and Waterlooville and Lovedean, and that money talks. Well, I think in this case it would seem that the voices of local people seem to be talking a bit louder at the moment. So I don't know if we got Janet back.
Let me just try and.
Yeah, she's back just now.
Yep, are you there?
Yeah, I'll just add to what Viola was saying that throughout we've had a strong fence, and we've been very encouraged with the number of new members. The decision was announced a week or so ago. We have a dated press release, which is very clear, pinned at the top of our Facebook and on our website. So we would encourage people to follow and look on their thoughts and comments and suggestions.
And I think this is the key now, isn't it? Is that, you know, it's been a number of years. We've thought the battle was won. The High Court have kind of forced us to take a couple of steps back, but it feels like, provided we can keep, you know, this can be kept in the public consciousness, and there are new people who are still willing to sign up and say no, that voice of public opinion, hopefully, is going to be loud enough to win the day.
Yeah, and if I may add there as well, I think particularly when it comes to addressing the new Secretary of State, we've got to take all these issues we felt were not dealt with appropriately, maybe during the examination process. You know, I'll give you an example. The asbestos and methane in Milton Common, if they would dig on Milton Common, it's always been poo-pooed. We sent a video in when Lumsden Road actually had to be evacuated because of asbestos, and that was rejected during the examination process because we were told there were pictures of children in the video, and we didn't have the facilities as grassroots to just cut out those pictures of those children's faces. So I think all these things will be revisited again, and we've got some older documents where, you know, I think we really have to highlight all those issues we care deeply about, all those concerns we have, and make sure we really get this through to the Secretary of State, that we don't do that just because we have nothing else to do. We care about our city, we care about our environment, and we care also what it does to the residency in the city.
I guess one factor that we haven't touched on is obviously Kwasi Kwarteng was the Secretary of State who, you know, found against, and as we all know, being followers of politics, he had a very brief tenure as Chancellor before being sent off into the bushes. I guess if we look at the timeline now, obviously Grant Shapps is the man in the chair now. There is a possibility, isn't there, that you know, this decision could drag on into a new Secretary of State and potentially even a new government in, you know, 2024, 2025. How much does that concern you?
Janet?
In actual fact, since Kwasi Kwarteng, it's been Jacob Rees-Mogg the role, and now who knows? But yes, I mean, with the fact that, you know, you've got the elections, you know, coming up in the future, who will be in place? You know, it doesn't seem to be much stability.
I think we probably can be pretty sure if Labour did win the next elections, I think this project would be scrapped. I mean, I'm only talking, you know, I believe, that's my opinion, because Stephen Morgan made it very clear, so did Penny Mordaunt, and still does. But either way, I think we have a good chance to stop this project. But there is never ever 100%, you know, we can't be 100% sure. We've got to be vigilant. We have got to be watchful. We have to check what's going on in the press, what's going on Aquind's website, what's going on Alexander Tamerko's website, and just be aware and vigilant.
Okay, so it seems like obviously the fight's not over. There's the slog goes on for an indeterminate amount of time. Then hopefully not too long, but who knows? So what is it that that you'd want people to do to continue to support Let's Stop Aquind? What would they do? You mentioned earlier on about needing funds to be able to do a letter or leaflet campaign again. Now that you know that sadly there is a need for that. Is there a GoFundMe or anything where people can help towards the cost of that, or are there other ways people should get involved? What would you want them to do? Janet?
Well, I mean, funds have always been an issue, and we did have a me once before which helped raise a little bit of money. I mean, that's something.
And we've lost Janet mid sentence.
Yeah. I think, Simon, it's a great idea. No, Janet?
Yeah, I mean, we're from locals, and a lot more people seem to be aware of the situation with all the, coverage in the press, that it might be a good time to think about having a crowdfunding of some sort. Yeah. We produced leaflets before, really out of our own pockets, more or less, with a little bit of public. But we have got more people on the Facebook site for a start now, and a lot of just been very supportive to back us up. So I think it's something we'll have to talk about again now.
Okay, Viola, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think that's a definite. I mean, we have thought about it, but we haven't yet come about to actually do it. But I think it's a very, very good idea to run a GoFund event again and say, really, we are needing some money for printing new leaflets to let all those people along the road know, and beyond, of course. And give some information to all those who are not on Facebook, who are not using the internet. And as we know, Moorings Way, for instance, it's an area where a lot of elderly people live, and they still like their leaflet. They like to look at what's happening just via paper or a leaflet. So I think that is one thing we will definitely do now. The comms group is going to meet regularly again, but as I say, people are busy. People have 2.5 years have passed, moved on. We might invite some more new members to the communication group as well and ask for some support. If people with certain skills could help out, graphic designer, communication skills, it would be great to welcome some new members. We have talked about it in the comms group as well. Above all, I think it is important to follow our Facebook and website to make sure you catch up with the latest news. That's at the moment how we communicate, and spread the message. Talk to people, talk to family, talk to friends, talk to anybody you meet and who doesn't know yet. Inform them, encourage them to find out more, and share it. Join the group if you can, and encourage others. And as we said at the beginning, we are coming back to the first question. Unity will get us there. In unity really lies our victory.
Indeed, it does.
Yeah, and that, I think, is a marvelous place to close the podcast on. So thank you, Janet. Thank you, Viola. As I say, let's hope the next time we meet on the podcast, we really are celebrating the victory once and for all. And on behalf of the people of Portsmouth and the local area, thank you to you both for your unerring campaigning style and for keeping this in the headlines. So it is much appreciated.
And thank you, Janet, for struggling through all those connection issues. Hopefully you can still hear me. I know you're trying to get back in. So, but thank you both.
Marvellous. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests have been Viola Langley and Janet Sampson from Let's Stop Aquind. And I've been Simon Sansbury.